Are my videos on?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can mute people.
Yes. So welcome everyone. As you heard from Zoom, we are recording this meeting. So if you want to close your cameras, you can just shut it down. Thank you very much for being here. We are so excited today to meet Trong and Chris again after their residence program at Gate 27 in September and October and November. Am I telling the times correctly? So today we will talk about their practices, what they have done during their stay at Gate 27 residency program. You can ask your questions through chat, or you can just direct your questions by opening your microphone and just talk. So it will be like a conversation, and I think it will be around 1 hour. So hope you enjoy it. So welcome back, Chris and Trong. Very nice to have you here.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah. So we make these meetings with every artist. This time we wanted to make it together with Chris and Trong. They didn't work in the same project, but they were at Gate 27 at the same time. And I think it was a great process for us and for them to be together. It also added value to whatever they are doing. So that's why we are together today. I don't want to talk too much and give the words to you guys and to talk about your practice. And it will be nice if you can introduce yourself first and then also talk about your practice. And we can start with Trong.
Sure. Okay, sounds good. I'll give a little introduction. So my name is Trong Nguyễn, and I'm an artist based in Brussels, Belgium. I've been here for about 2.5 years since the pandemic started, unfortunately. And before that, I was living in Vietnam for 5 years. And then before that in New York for 15 years. And so I've been kind of making my rounds a bit, the world a bit too in my own little way. And so the residency in Gate 27 for me was kind of a culmination of the last 5 to 7 years worth of work that I've kind of been doing in Vietnam for the most part, and kind of its continuation in Brussels. And so that's what I'll be talking to you about today.
Perfect, thank you. And Trong has multiple positions. Actually, he's an artist. He's a creator, and he's teaching, and he's also he has done lots of exhibitions as a creator and ran a gallery. So we have lots of things to hear from you about everything, actually. So Chris is right now in US. Can you also make an introduction about you, Chris?
Yeah, so I'm an artist in the United States, and I work usually in sculpture, but sculpture's led me to photography and performance work. And in the last few years, I've started integrating music and bands into my projects. And at Gate 27, I was doing a kind of a hybrid of all those things, of walking the streets, taking photography, sculpture, and all those things led me to many of the works I did that worked with both sculpture, publicly engaged work, and also music.
So maybe we can continue from here, actually. When you like for Gate 27, we get an application from the artist. So they apply with a project, but throughout the process, it changes. The projects can change. It can evolve into something else. So with Chris, I think it was the case. Like he had imagined something, but throughout his stay in Gate 27, he had lots of projects, and it was really productive for you. So can we hear a little bit about the projects that you have done here, and like maybe your first impressions when you came to Istanbul, and how it affected your process in your stay?
Me?
We can continue with Chris, actually. So, Chris.
Yeah, I think so much. It was what was wonderful is that Trong and I were new to the city, and we got to share food, walk the streets, meet friends together. And we almost did these things in partnership, but we were kind of taking in the city in different ways. The rush of the city, a city that feels like a hybrid between like Delhi and New York City and just the such intense, beautiful landscape. The crossover between very developed and modern, and also really kind of rural in the city and economically deprived. So it was a real kind of spectrum in terms of what this modern city is. Mm-hmm. So, and that was kind of part of it for me.
Mm-hmm. And for me, it was a very intense city, and in a way, you're there for a certain period of time, and you kind of had to set everything about the city aside, because for me, my processes are a bit different from Chris. So I kind of had a project in mind already with intentions of what I wanted to do. And so I was really pursuing that, and everything that was happening in the city in terms of my experience with it and our experience with it, you take it in, and it's incredible in so many different ways. But for me, I also really put it to the side too. Otherwise, it was a bit too much bombardment for me. And I felt like, I couldn't concentrate properly on the things at hand. And I really needed to narrow the things that I was doing in order to focus on it, because it's overstimulating being in Istanbul.
Yeah, definitely. And you already started before you came, actually. You already met people, tried to organize some funding for your production. And I think it was nice that you already planned everything ahead, so that your projects kind of improved fastly. But it was also a short period of time. 1.5 months was not enough, mm-hmm. actually. But I think you are also planning to come back to finish what you have started, actually, right, Trong?
Yes, or start something completely different. I think, even living in Vietnam for 5 years, it took me a long time to let the city kind of come into the work. So mm-hmm. It's not, for me, it's not that fast a process, actually. And so I think even looking through some of the photographs from Istanbul this morning and yesterday, you realize how much you experienced in such a short period of time. And it takes additional time to process it all. And then for as an artist, to let that come into your work as well. And so with all these stimulants, there are so many things that can happen, and so many potential works that it can go in so many different ways as well. So it's exciting to kind of just let that happen, really. So I'm not forcing anything, and just letting it kind of come to me. In the meantime, still pursuing the interest that I initiated when I first got there.
Mm-hmm. It is also what Istanbul is, actually. It is full of surprises, and it really, you cannot make plans. It makes its own plans, and you have to follow it through as well. So maybe, Trong, it will be nice if you can tell us about your practice in general, like what you are working on, what topics you are concentrating more. And then maybe you can connect it to the project that you have started at Gate 27. And maybe show some images about your works. Maybe it's more helpful for the audience to see what you're doing.
Do you want me to go ahead and start and do that now? Because
yes,
I can just plug into it. I'll be kind of brief. Let me see. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, and then I'll kind of take you through, I think, the steps of kind of what I was doing before getting to Istanbul, and kind of looking at the work a little bit and seeing how that kind of progressed into what I was doing in Istanbul, and then what may come of it beyond that. Let me know if it works. There we go. Is that working?
Yes. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. So I'm going to start here with an exhibition that I did in Berlin about a month before I came to Istanbul. And in that exhibition, one of the primary works were two things kind of related to the pandemic. I was thinking a lot, of course, like everyone else, being locked down, and thinking about where you can go, where you cannot go, all these things. And so in that exhibition, one of the main works was this floor that you see here, which is a QR code, as you can see, made of black and white tiles. And so arranged in a format that you can walk on, but that is representational of my vaccination certificate, actually. And so this is the first Pfizer vaccination that you see. And then let me move on here. You can see it from aerial view. And then this is another piece that is the barcode for the second vaccination, second Pfizer vaccination. And so together, these two things are architectural elements that kind of form a space that kind of navigates the viewer, where they are kind of forced to be inside this space and forced to kind of contemplate these things, and specifically in relationship to the pandemic and how you can come and go, how you can not come and go, and looking at things like freedom of movement to constriction, all these things. And then before that, when I was in Vietnam, I was looking at a lot about the kind of like architectural decay and the evolution of cities as they come and go. And I found a lot of parallels in Istanbul and in Turkey, where you have a lot of the old and the new kind of compressed together. And in Vietnam, you have a lot of building that's going on, a lot of construction. And so a lot of what I was doing was looking at these kind of domestic spaces, you know, and looking at domestic spaces as kind of monumental spaces in their own right, and kind of superimposing this idea of the American dream onto the Vietnamese landscape. And so in this image, for instance, you see this hashtag picket fence that takes its reference from the, you know, American dream white picket fence. This notion that, you know, you've made it as a family, you've made it. You bought a 3-bedroom house, you have 2 cars, you have this beautiful white picket fence, 2.3 kids, and, you know, and looking at what all these things mean. And then also this idea of monument in terms of modularity too. So what you have here in this image is our piecemeal pieces of a picket fence that can be attached to one another. So they can grow as big as necessary, they can magnify as much as necessary, and it will be important for later things. And so these are just, you know, images from Vietnam about things such as the architectural decay and kind of, you know, the ugliness and beauty of it all too. This is from Istanbul. And so I'm just kind of showing you reference images that will relate to some of the other works and images that we'll come across. You can see this facade here that has nothing behind it, but that nonetheless it has its own beauty as well. And then these are the kind of security grates that you see on windows in Vietnam that you also see in Europe and Istanbul as well. And so I was utilizing a lot of these beautiful geometric patterns in my work at some point in Vietnam. And I was taking a lot of these patterns and looking at them, much like you see in the floor, this idea of security and what it means to come and go, and what they can do in terms of locking you down or allowing you to go past. And this is in the Hagia Sophia, a kind of barrier that has a pattern. This is my studio in Vietnam a while back, and you can see on the window there, you have that kind of beautiful pattern. And to the left are some works that resulted from that. And so here's one work that kind of came from all these ideas. I was taking these pictures of these windows that I was seeing and then recreating them, not in metal, which is intended to protect, but in wood, which is actually very fragile, and if you drop it, it breaks. And I was utilizing a lot of imagery that related to simple things like, you know, the beauty of light, the sun in the morning, the moon in the evening. So this is an image on the right that you see is how the process worked. I started with a giant piece of wood that I painted on, and then it's cut so that you're left with a fragment of the original. And so you have, you know, 85%, 90% of it is gone, and so you're left to kind of piece it back together. And so it relates to, again, these kind of ideas of fragments and fragments of architectural decay, if you want to call it that. So, and then I started kind of evolving into other images. And so this is on the right, you see is an image of from 1963 of the monk who was protesting the communist government and burning himself on the streets of Saigon. And on the left is the finished image where it's been cut out completely, and you're left with this fragment of in a way, a traumatic historical event. And again, I'm kind of superimposing those things together, this idea of being complicit or present to histories. Here's another one. This is an image taken in Cambodia of the killing fields. And again, you have these beautiful geometric patterns that in the end look very aesthetic and are very pleasing, but the references themselves tend to be very kind of dark and challenging in many ways. Here's another one. And like architectural details, they can suspend, they hang on the wall, so they take the places where you would find things domestically. Here's another one. And so this idea has evolved, and then eventually I started thinking a lot about kind of the digital age and about how these notions of windows relate to that. So taking the traditional iron windows and using that material again, I recreated the windows in that original material, but redid them as kind of broken mobile phone windows, creating these portals that that basically are a gateway into your digital life and your digital existence, and looking at those issues of privacy and how you move around too, from real life to your digital existence. And then I was incorporating other architectural details, as you see here, kind of a gypsum wall that's been placed around it to kind of replicate how things are built and destroyed and how they evolve over time. And then one of the last places I went to when I was in Vietnam was an island called Con Dao. That was a famous prisons island during the Vietnam War, where kind of top level prisoners were kept and tortured and stuff. And you can see here in this particular building, on the roof of on the ceiling of this space is it's a very dark, barbed wire ceiling that, first of all, you're in this space where it's difficult to escape already and move about already. And here you have a barbed wire ceiling that makes it that much more imposing. Here's a detail of it. This is from Istanbul. So I'm showing you kind of details that you would, again, kind of see from city to city. And while I was in Istanbul, I was kind of making these comparisons of things that I was seeing from an urban point of view. And I find the two cities themselves to be kind of very aligned in that way too. And so this was a body work that I did in Vietnam too, where I was creating these kind of almost like bed frames that were hung on the wall, and they were made of barbed wire, but forming these portraits of sports figures and political figures in these kind of like sports poses, like this is Donald Trump playing golf, for instance, and kind of looking at not only looking at the darker aspects of you can say sporting activity, but also kind of all the things related to it, and the history in Vietnam and the I don't know, and the history in America too of these events and how they can relate politically as well, I suppose. And so this is a protest image of the American athlete Colin Kaepernick protesting, where he's kneeling on an American football field. And so I'm kind of utilizing these images that are somewhat universal, somewhat not universal, but kind of trying some things as well. It's another image that is kind of taken from multiple images that are collaged together. And then this is important. This is the work from a while ago where I was utilizing these kind of architectural floor plans and kind of cutting them into the grass. And so again, looking at this idea of domesticity and monuments and how these things kind of intersect. And here you have these floor plans that I was making at a time that really reference traumatic spaces. So this was a space, for instance, that you see here called a women's room, where it relates to a journalist's account of what she saw during the Serbian-Croatian War, and about how hellish war is, and how badly not only prisoners were treated, but women prisoners as well. And so this was an account from one of the women prisoners who described this room where you had 7 beds, a door, a bathroom that they shared, and then every evening, soldiers would come and knock on the door and basically choose which women to rape that night. So there's these super dark, traumatic events. But the work itself is of a softer nature. It's grass. You can picnic on it. You can walk across it, and it ultimately grows back as well. So there are all these factors that relate to it that I find fascinating for my work in terms of, again, this idea of where domestic meets monument. And then in Vietnam, one of the things that really interested me was the tradition of tile, which is how I evolved in the Berlin exhibition, and looking at the tradition of cement tile production, and just the beautiful patterns that you see also in the windows. And so in Istanbul, I started off with the notion of researching tile production, because it has this deep history of it, and starting with several different positions of tile production, I guess. We were one of the first places we visited, I think, was a concrete tile studio workshop, where this gentleman is producing them as they've been producing them for the last 80 years, 70, 80 years, I think. And these are the templates. And you can see, again, kind of these beautiful patterns. And these things are, again, kind of domestic details that I'm interested in. Okay, and then we get to kind of the more grandiose imperial palaces and mosques, and this is the Topkapi Palace. So you can see all the beautiful Ishnic tiles in there. And so this is one of the grand traditions also in Turkey, what's known as Ishnic, which was produced between 1500 to 1700, and then kind of tapered off. And it was just in the last 40 years that it's picked up again. And you can see these beautiful patterns. And so I'm looking at these patterns and looking at how they can relate again to this idea of potentially of monument. Ceiling, some details, floors. And you can see the beautiful kind of floral patterns that are repeated and utilized kind of over and over. And I'm really interested, as I said previously, in this idea of modularity too, and how the repetition of things can create this notion of monument. This is from the Blue Mosque. And then so you have concrete tiles, you have Ishnic tiles, and then you have Kütahya tiles, which is a tradition that also kind of took place at the same time as Ishnic. And I was able early on in Istanbul to visit the Pera Museum, which has a great collection of Kütahya ceramics. And so it's similar in terms of what it's utilizing in the way of motifs. So you see a lot of the same flower patterns, a lot of the same motifs, but it's done in more of a kind of a folk manner. It's a bit more expressionistic, a bit more loose, whereas Ishnic is much more tighter and much more refined in a way. But you can see the similarities. And as the kind of Ottoman Empire kind of declined, the Ishnic production kind of stopped too because of the monies that were going to palaces and imperial spaces and such. And Kütahya kind of took over a little bit after that. So just showing you the similarities and differences here, and the beauty of it all too. Let me know you want to see something. And then at some point we were able to visit the Ishnic Foundation. And what we learned, it was really great. We found out that it was only in the last 40 years that they were able to unearth the traditional methods of producing these tiles, which each individual tile takes about 70 days to complete from beginning to end. And it was a really great visit. And here you can see some of the details from the shop and the foundation. In the studio where the artisans are painting and transferring the cartoons and such. And these are just details from the premises. And actually one of the most important things that I discovered during that trip was the fact that Ishnic itself is a little city that's known for its mining of quartz. And what makes Ishnic tiles, what makes Ishnic tile are the fact that the content of them is 85% quartz. And so the city is famous for mining quartz. And in Kütahya ceramics and in other ceramics, the typical quartz content is between 5 to 15% max. And in Ishnic, it's 85%. And I found that really fascinating because quartz itself is also a crystal that's used to heal. It's a crystal, and it's a mineral that supposedly brings kind of balance and serenity and all these things. And the fact that they're in places like mosques, especially these kind of religious spaces where those aspects are really important, it was something that really fascinated me because I hadn't read really anything about it. And so for my work, it will become an important thing at some point, this notion of it being kind of a healing element. These are more details from over there. And so really, I mean, a lot of my production over there was just kind of creating patterns kind of based on a lot of what I just showed you. So details such as the floral roses, tulips, and and then incorporating these kind of traditional motifs with things that are darker, as you see. So in this little rendering, you can see the barbed wire kind of intermixed with the medallions. And so these are all just kind of sketches I was doing on wood and trying to come up with a pattern that again, that I could be happy with. And at some point I could look at it in terms of its modularity being reproduced. And magnified ultimately. And so these are this was, I think, the last one that I ended up with, which I was quite happy with. And kind of looking at it also with the tightness of its rendering in terms of Ishnic, and then kind of doing samples where they were a bit more loose in terms of Kutaya as well. And then after that, continuing on this notion of domesticity, I started revisiting this idea of these kind of architectural floor plans and how, again, these things can manifest themselves in domestic spaces and be considered as, in a way, modest monuments. And so I was recreating these architectural icons that we're pretty familiar with when we're looking at blueprints. So everything from beds and dining tables to washer and dryer. So they always have these very kind of iconic geometric symbols that represent them. So this, of course, that you see here is a range, a stove. You can see the 4 burners. And so I created this using a CNC machine that routed it and created a working kind of table with wheels underneath that is intended to, in a way, be a sort of small movable monument, if you want to call it that. So it's kind of experimenting with this idea. And then one of the other pieces I made also at the end there was another architectural icon, and this is a sink. So again, kind of taking items and details from these spaces that you normally would not consider monumental, and in a way thinking about them in those terms. And this is the Hagia Sophia that me and Chris visited twice, I think. And I'm showing this because of its history. And it will relate to some of the images I'll show you in a second. And you can see here, kind of from this aerial view, the beautiful details everywhere in the building, and the beautiful floor and the beautiful chandeliers. And most of us know last year was turned back into, it was originally created as a Christian structure and then became a secular structure. And then last year was turned into Islamic religious building, so a mosque. And in a mosque, you normally have carpeting to keep people's dirt and material outside of the religious space. So this is how the Hagia Sophia is today, with the green carpeting on the floor that's covering kind of the beautiful stone floors. Here's some parts of it is still exposed. These are just a detail of the carpet. And again, a little barrier in there. And so I was thinking about this, this notion, I think, of layering. I mean, for my work in terms of how things build up over time and how things evolve over time. And in Istanbul, you have a deep, deep history. I mean, that goes back a long way. And so you imagine just doing any kind of archaeological dig, it goes back and back and back. And so I wanted to look at that aspect too, kind of not only literally, but kind of metaphorically, how it relates to how histories change and how these spaces, how something like the Hagia Sophia, for instance, one day is a mosque and tomorrow, it's something else. Well, one day it's stone, the next day it's carpeting, and the next day it could be linoleum. And so looking at, again, how these things can potentially relate to the notion of domesticity and monument. And so here I'm just playing with the arrangement. And so these are some renderings of some ideas I've been thinking about that were a result of my research and kind of the last kind of week in Istanbul when I was working and thinking about these things, and as I'll continue to think about them from here on out. And so looking at the QR code and this notion of where the digital intersects the manual and the reality of things, and just seeing what happens with it when you mix them up. And so here you can kind of see this idea where I'm kind of laying the tiles on top of the carpet that may have laid on top of a stone floor, that may have laid on dirt, that may have laid on limestone, that may have laid on whatever, right? So you have this whole evolution of how cities and histories are built. And so just some other renderings of this notion of sediment and this notion of layering. And then kind of thinking about these, thinking about kind of more widely this notion of fragmentation and this notion of how cities decline and how empires decline and what are the symbols that end up representing them, and again kind of taking it away from all these things that deal with the grandiose and accumulating it in a domestic space essentially. And that's it. That's my last image, and that's kind of where I'm at now. I think after all the work in Istanbul and kind of thinking about it and starting off with the point of saying, okay, I'm gonna go look at tiles, and this is where I'm at now. And so hopefully I'll continue with this research and continue looking at this idea of modularity and monument. To me, it's really important, because I think, you know, we're often used to thinking of these spaces as kind of feminine spaces, as women's spaces. But for me, you know, being a father too, you really start thinking about these domestic spaces as well. And so in recent years, I think even in the last 10 years, it's become a really important thing for me. And I think also with this the notion of, I think, consumption and the notion of sustainability too. You don't always want to put all your resource into something that ends up you know, taking up too much space or whatever. So it's a lot of this kind of mentality that's involved among other important things that have gone on in my life as well. So I'll stop there. That's the last slide.
Wow, that was an amazing wrap up. In a very short time, you wrapped up all the previous productions and how you started with this topic of tile and how you came to this point. It's amazing, and we are looking forward to see what it will evolve into later on. I'm sure you will follow it up with some projects in Turkey as well. So looking forward to hear them too. Yeah. So thank you, Trong. So I would like to pass the word to Chris. I also would like to hear what he has done here, how he started thinking about producing. He also had a very productive process at K27. So if you have the presentation ready, we can also share it.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Yeah, anytime I'd go down to Trong's room and it'd be so clean and like concise ideas, and I'd be like in this like I'd bring the mess of Istanbul into my studio somehow, and I'd have to slowly start to filter and like figure out, categorize, kind of figure out ways to kind of organize all the different things I was looking at and you know, drawn to in the city. And I'm just gonna go through more in a process base of what happened to me in Istanbul. And, you know, some of the things in this room are kind of like everything that became works in ways. So, sorry, I had to do this. This is the last morning I was there, and I was just so sad I had to leave. But, you know, Trong would see these mornings more than I would. I'd be, you know, he would have his coffee, but I'd still be slowly getting up. But I would definitely see some of these morning sunrises too. When we started taking walks around the city, I immediately just started documenting like the sculptures I saw on the street. I did a series of sculptures called Left Behind in 2009 through like ongoing, where I just document my own sculptures in the street. But Istanbul just has so many different ways of like how you solve problems on the street. And these are like saving parking spots. You know, the different tires and forms, things that you would block, ways to hold things. And you'll see different patterns start to emerge as I'm just kind of clicking through stuff. I don't know what's going on here, but I enjoyed the sculpture. Trong and I went to the farmer's market near Gate 27 down the hill, and it was extremely rainy that day, but this is how these beautiful sculptures are being made, kind of to hold down the tarps to get the water to kind of run off as it was raining. This is Trong and I on our big walk with our friend Archie, who took us along the entire Byzantine wall. I had to throw that in there. And our feet would be, you know, very tired after walking multiple miles all the time in this wonderful city. These are just like other forms from the street, things that catch my eye. Oh, cigarettes. That was something I was shocked by in Istanbul. And the cats. and I started to try to figure out, how do I group these pieces together? And these pieces, one thing I started paying attention to was circles. I just noticed the circles everywhere. Maybe because my mind was, when I came to Istanbul, I was thinking about symbols, both kind of cymbals that you would kind of hit on a drum kit, as well as that are made in Istanbul itself. And the cymbals, actual cymbals that even we were seeing in Trong's work too. This is the first night I was there. Trong and I arrived on a full moon, and Bengu took us up to the deck, or took me up to the deck, and I looked out and recorded this image. And it became like a centerpiece.
Sorry, Chris, can you lower the volume of the video a little bit?
Yeah, sorry.
Not too much. Maybe higher, so that we can hear you well. Yeah.
This is a piece I called Circle Moon, and it's the circles I was kind of collecting through Istanbul, like pickle juice, Lamajun, the crescents that are, you know, almost a circle, but not like the, that's the mosque, Hagia Sophia again. And I was intercutting both the high and low of the city, like the things on the street and the really kind of exceptional kind of artisan work that we found in the city. And some of these pieces too, each video I was working with, I was also developing a soundtrack. So what we're hearing here too, and I'm gonna kind of cut this one just a little short, but that's a good one to end on, Simit. I did this sound percussion with Ege Kanar, who's an artist that Trong and I met in many of the several kind of introductions that Gate and Bengu would introduce us to multiple artists. This Ege had gone to the Sabancı University, and we'd seen his work of these symbol works in the museum, and we started these different friendships with different artists. So Ege came back, and we did this percussion. He's using these deaf and kind of drums. He was doing hand percussion, and I was using these cymbals I had made or had fabricated. And, you know, I kept wanting to do these custom cymbals that were based on certain symbols of Turkey. But I just kind of fell in love with these cymbals that were fabricated by V Classic Cymbals in Istanbul. And these are just cymbal blanks. And I kind of didn't want to change them once I had them, because there's something so kind of magnificent about these circles themselves, the material, the metal that are these symbols. So I just started having different friends play these too. And, you know, that was kind of, this is the Turkish flag. And I kept thinking, like, how do I work with symbols in different ways? And, you know, it's tricky working with the symbols of another culture. So I started kind of seeing what are the symbols that I kind of found along my walks and discovering the city. So, you know, the first version of this is, you know, we're in COVID in Turkey, and I purchased this face shield, and I wanted to do something quick just to get my mind going. And I collected all these different kinds of images of protection or things that need to be protected that were both kind of Turkish as well as maybe crossover to American things too. And, you know, I was also just doing things quickly. I was doing these digital drawings of the tree, and this tree had since fallen since we've been there. And I just kind of putting that out there. I was just doing things quick, but I'm showing how these digital drawings kind of inform things later too. When I first started there, I was thinking, I was like, oh, I'm gonna work with the Bosphorus a lot. And it was so hard. But this is a Bosphorus symbol and a cutout of the Bosphorus that I still am working on cutting out on the symbol. And it goes with these kind of cutouts of the Bosphorus. I started doing these digital kind of mock-ups of different shapes, and the Bosphorus was one of those first kind of shapes I started working with. These are kind of video stills from a video I'm still working with, where the symbol will be the sound of that. I recorded a friend drumming that Bosphorus symbol. So I'm gonna use that for the video that will kind of match this Bosphorus. And it might get projected through that symbol too. This is that wall I was talking about that Trong and I did this epic walk with our friend Archie, and we walked the entire wall, this whole Byzantine period wall of Istanbul. And it was really incredible because we kind of walked through all these different neighborhoods that day, and you got to see, parts of the city that were developed and not developed. And, this is this form that really kind of stuck to me in this walk, which was this saj pan, which is used to cook flatbreads and this bread, stuffed bread called gözleme. And that walk, we inquired with the women there, and I was like, what is that? And she's like, here, and like not speaking English, I'm not speaking Turkish, but she offered me this flatbread that all of us ate. And that kind of stuck with me. I've always been interested with food and art, and how you digest or kind of like merge different materials together to make a single kind of dish or form is not unlike what we do making art too. So this is like this digital drawing, and this came a lot later, and I'll kind of talk about the process, but this is for a piece. I wanted to start doing these kind of scores or drawings that others could play. And it's kind of like a graphic that's also an instruction or like a music composition. So, this is called Ista Meta Bull, which is kind of like a riff on Istanbul, but it's this kind of metaphor or this meta version of what Istanbul is. And it was kind of funny. I wrote this down, and then Facebook changed its name to Meta, which is weird, but I don't care. But a friend was telling me like, hey, this is bull is this in the word, you're searching for something in a way. You're seeking something out. And I found that really kind of interesting, where performers could then perform this with pieces of rebar. This is kind of like a take on how buildings are constructed, from the dirt to the foundation of bricks to rebar. And I fell in love with these tools to then make sound percussion. I'll just show a little of this walk. And rebar is like made in Turkey. It's like a huge fabrication country for rebar. And this is just kind of like a documentation of the walk Trong, Archie, and I took. But what we realized was that there's new agricultural farms that have been part of the walls and the moats over time. And, talking to some other architects and historians of Istanbul, some of these kind of different agrarian, like kind of farms in the city are also being challenged in terms of areas for construction. So there's this kind of tension that's there with these spaces. These are these huge farms that are along the wall, in the southern part of the wall. And there's different kind of tombs that are kind of along there too, that are being restored. And this is not unlike the Bosphorus. It's just following a line, a shape that's in the city and working with it. This is where they're restoring the wall with these big timbers. And I always had a dream that, like, a wish that I still want to do this piece where it would be played in public space with a group of people with the tools. So, we got rebar that day, and I actually make rebar sticks. I had made before, but I made these drumsticks out of rebar. And, I did the sound percussion. Thanks, Trong, for taking pictures of me doing something at the studio. I was making noise, and Trong came up and started filming. I did this, all of that is just with a loop pedal and me kind of slowly hitting the wood handle and then moving my way down the shovel and this adds too. And I would just kind of loop and build the sound. And I would do these alone and see where it would happen. And that informed the graphics. So, what I was doing in terms of tapping and stuff was also kind of informing the direction. So there's just some examples. I'll keep moving. As I was saying, I still have this vision to kind of have a group of people playing a rubble site in Istanbul and doing a recording of this piece too. So, you know, the score is there and it's ready to be played again at some point. You know, we were also, you know, anytime I was filming stuff, I kept filming stairs. And then I would do these percussion kind of pieces in the studio with vessels and feedback from microphones. And this is not complete, but it's just like another video where I was combining multiple kind of stairwells from multiple buildings we visited that I fell in love with. I was also kind of thinking about the depth and sound of a space, and also just thinking about our ear in a way with some of these videos. And this is still from like the first week we were there. Like the second day we visited an amazing stairwell in this building our friend Archie lived in his wife. And, you know, I kept wanting better vessels. I was using the trash cans of K27 and these things and these glass tubes, but it led me to Trong and I were out taking a walk in the neighborhood again. And I'm glad I had Trong with me, because he's like, you got to barter, Chris. You can't just pay top dollar for these like old crusty things. You need to barter. It's part of the culture. Come on. So I would, you know, we found one spot and I got these gooms, these vessels for carrying milk or also other kind of liquids. And I got this collection of these things and I was like, well, how do I do something with these? But I had these contact mics and it led me to electrify, and I had some fabricated, which is awesome in Istanbul. There's so many amazing fabricators everywhere. But I kind of created these circles for these vessels so that there'd be kind of this arena to play. And this is like other kind of studio shots of my room. And this is the Bengu taking photos from the window, looking in on me. And oh yeah, here we go. Where's this one? Yeah. That was these awesome videos that other friends would come to the studio. Electro Goom. Am I saying that right, Ben?
Almost. Goom. It's okay.
Goom.
Goom is okay.
But I was thanks, Bengu. I started tapping these and I'd play these on my own, and then I'd invite friends back and see what they would do with them. How are these sculptural forms or these objects of everyday life? What are their sonic properties? And I would be kind of investigating them. And then I'd have a friend investigate them. And, you know, this is Ege Kanar, the artist I mentioned at the beginning. And I'm kind of sharing these just to kind of show how process is informed by friends and others, kind of their emotions on things. And then that would kind of lead to my decisions of a score. So it led me to this design. And, you know, part of the design, you can see I was thinking about the actual object and the form and how it works. But I was also, whoa, I gotta speed up. I was also just thinking about his motions, the circular motions of his hand and stuff too. So eventually we did like a session where we played together. And it's just like a little sample of these compositions, you know, and just a shout out to Trong. I just realized, you know, the more I went through these designs and after Trong left, I was like, whoa, I was totally super influenced by how Trong was kind of digesting these kind of shapes and forms of the culture and kind of reinterpreting it in his own way and creating these graphics. And I was like, wait, I'm doing a similar thing where I'm using drawing and I'm also kind of like filtering these things for these sound compositions. And I think just hanging around with Trong and kind of, it was reciprocal. Hopefully it was reciprocal, but like I was really inspired by how he was kind of doing these pieces. But I was amazed how much it filtered into my own kind of process in my own direction. But I was like, wait, he's using units. Wait, I'm using units. Wait, I'm using pattern. Wait, what happened here? But all of that is, from these are women. Sorry, I kind of skipped, but this is the making of gozleme. This is one version we saw. There's other versions too. Gozleme is made on the Sollars pans from Trong and Archie and my walk early on. And we had watched this woman make gozleme, and I recorded the process, and I tried to just, speaking of like, how do you digest how something's made? I then tried to come up with a series of symbols in a way that kind of interpreted like if I didn't speak the language, if we couldn't interpret it, could the motion or graphics, just like a sign on the street, give you like a way to interpret like what's being made and give you direction in a way too. So, like seeing Trong in his studio doing these things kind of led me to do these weird kind of digital drawings. And, I would then invite different artists to perform with them. This is an early version with this German percussionist and musician and artist, Holger Merton. And he came over and interpreted. We met a couple times and he came over and tried the score out. And it was through conversations with Holger too, that I started doing variation of kind of weight of line, and as well as kind of like heaviness of how light and how dark the color was on pieces, so that it could create volume and create different kind of spatial arrangements too in the pieces. And it was really good to see someone else again do these kind of gestures, because they open up the pieces. So I'm constantly being informed by others do these strange kind of moments. And it was great at Gate too, because I got to make food with Bengu. And Bengu and I got to, I had this weird idea. I was like, let's cook gulzhame and we'll play gulzhame. And Bengu and I did a trial with Rana at Gate. On the first day we made gulzhame. We had some mishaps and we had some successes. And from there we kind of rolled with that to the, to practice for the event. That's the two of us cooking gulzhame outside. And you can see how the Sajpan then influenced like a redesign of the score in a way too, to think about this as like an album cover, an LP, as well as a graphic score for playing gulzhame. So it's both the instruction of how to make it and how to play it. And Melissa's over here in this other one. And it was really great because I got to have many different versions of this be played while I was there with different people. Melissa and I did this kind of like, I did it solo and then with Melissa one night. I did it with Holger and myself. I also got to do it with solo and then with a group of people that came and made gulzhame. That gesture is based on the oil being kind of put down on the pan or on the gulzhame itself. But the best way was that I'd interpret these different things I was inspired by from Turkish culture. And then it's really important to me to kind of create, it's really important for me to create an opportunity, an agency with friends that are Turkish to then be involved in these pieces. So it wasn't about me doing this, but it was about creating this kind of involvement in the weird ways I've digested and played with these forms. So we would eat gulzhame, we'd have fun casually, and then we would play gulzhame. And this is like a excerpt of all of us being noisy. And, my favorite saying of the night was like Bengu then saying, we eat it, we make it, we eat it, we play it, we are we are gulzhame. And I love these after effect messes at the end, the different piles of how they would end, and everyone would interpret it differently, which is the whole point of the piece. And I was talking about these being albums. I'm kind of thinking about how these can be, how you can have the pan inside the piece and you can take it out and you can play it, and the score would either be printed or in the piece. And the last, one of the last pieces is these cigarette packs I collected everywhere. I mean, because smoking's everywhere. And it led me to this weird piece where it's like, I want to make a smoking jacket. And I started making these designs. I started thinking about how you can wear this thing that is everywhere in Turkey. And it's not like the American cigarette packs where they're really intense. And these are Yves Saint Laurent kind of based jackets that I was doing these designs of. And then I had them fabricated by a local fabricator, seamstress in Turkey, in Istanbul. This is Archie and a friend of his on the streets outside of one of my band's performances. This is Bengu and me wearing jackets. This is our friend Bilal and not Eja. Eja, yeah. Eja, who are both Gate 27 artists. Eja came after Trong was there. Bilal figured out how you could reverse the jacket. I had them stitched with this foil fabric. So it was like a pack of cigarettes, and he inversed it. And on the last day I was there, I did this piece where I worked with this photographer, Emre, and we did a photo shoot of different performers that I met, different artists I met in my stay in Istanbul. And we did this kind of photo shoot. These are just excerpts. And these are just some different moments from some of the photo shoots too. And the performance were Iberg, Busra, and Ada. Ada and Busra are two artists I met in the stay in Istanbul. And Iberg was this friend of Archie's, who is this on the left here, and his friend Erdem on the center. I did it on white backgrounds because I wanted to try to see how I could have different combinations of these kind of model shoots, kind of performance, thinking about being the object, a cigarette pack, and what our gestures might be, and what does it mean to be kind of like wearing this box, this carton. But the whole point of these jackets was also inspired by the band Exhaust that I started with Archie and Erdem. Archie is a friend I've had in San Francisco prior to Istanbul, and I came there and I was forming my own kind of music projects, and he was like, let's play together and I'll bring my friend Erdem. And then I ended up on guitar, and then we wrote like 8 songs, and here's like a so we didn't know that we would have such a intense kind of shows, but people were really energized and had not been to a punk show or a rock show in a while. And some of these kids just started dancing, and we were just kind of in shock. But the whole thing kind of goes back to this idea of exhaust, whether it's cigarette smoke, car fumes of the streets of Istanbul. And, the photographs of the things on the street would then become posters for our shows. all our lyrics are both have lyrics that are both in English and also in Turkish. So we're kind of combining some of our language that's cross-cultural in our bands and our songs. They're about parts of Istanbul, whether it's Taksim being developed, integration, different things coming together, different stories of the different band members and how they might become songs. Bar Wine was a song that Archie always dedicated to Trong because he was drinking bar wine and not like really nice wine. And he always gave that shout out to him. And this song Teşekkürler, where I could never say Teşekkürler. So it's a whole song about somebody going to try to say thank you and they're having trouble. And it's a whole kind of story and song about that. We had a chance to play like at Gate 27, record some mellow songs there on the last couple days. And we did 3 performances in Istanbul. And this was like the last live moment of the show. Archie found a cowboy, found like an animal bone, and we brought it on stage for our song Anthropocene, and kind of ended the set. I know I'm over time, aren't I, Bengu?
Little bit, but it was really fun and actually to go back to the days that you and Trong were here. So I'm so happy to see all these images and listen to your process here. Thank you very much.
So, Trong, I finally went too long.
What's that?
I finally went too long this time.
No, it's good. It's perfect. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
No sweat.
I mean, the only last thing is like there's like, I can give you a taste of kitty paws here for a second, and then I can stop it. Do you want a little kitty paws?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That seems like a good spot to. That's just a little taste. It'll be out on. We'll post it once it's like I get the sound remixed, but it's close. All the lyrics are inspired by all the collection of cat images that I did while there in Istanbul at Gate. Thank you, Gate.
Thank you, Chris. So thank you very much to both of you. I'm echoing. Okay, not now. Thank you very much for the presentations and all the stories that you shared with us. So we are a little bit over time, but I would like to ask if there is any question from our audience. Maybe it's the right time. You can just unmute yourself and ask or talk. Yeah, writing on chat is also an option.
Well, if there's no questions, I would like to covidly jump in. And first of all, thank you, both of you. It was a wonderful presentation, but also it was great to have you over. It wasn't only fun, but it was also a high learning curve for, I think, for me and the Gate team. It was very inspiring to have both of you at the same time. It was a great coincidence, I think, to have both of you at the same time. And also it was very exciting to hear the results and the effects of the influence, what Chris said in the end about having Trong and inspiring one another. That's really valuable. That's what we're trying to find in Gate, and also the communal experiences you both had. That was very, very like made me feel like, yes, we are doing the right thing. I'm happy that we're here and we're part of the process. And yes, Carrie, I was thinking about you when we were watching Kitty Paws. We had two cat lovers. Actually, no, Ozan. let's not count out Ozan. Also, Ozan is a huge cat lover as well in our Gate community. So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. It was wonderful to have both of you. Very inspiring, and we're really happy that you guys joined the Gate 27 family and community.
Well, thank you too for all of you for making it happen. I mean, I think the community aspect of it was really one of the most essential things for me. I mean, with lucking out that Chris was there, but then kind of sharing these experiences and really being able to connect to the real community there. It was one of the most important things for me in the end, for sure, because I think, you know, it presents other kind of opportunities and potential collaborations with friends now in the future. And you know, it's exciting. And it's like I said earlier, it's such a stimulating city that you have to give it time to process, you know, so, but thank you.
Yeah, that was definitely just the opportunity to meet, to work with all of you, because you were all super supportive. Melissa, Rana, and Bengu, just like incredibly supportive, and would also help us out with many different things in our interests, and also immediately connect us with people that you thought would be fun and overlapping. And, you know, I think that was amazing kind of cross-cultural, international kind of exchange that was happening, where we constantly got to meet artists and have all these and art professionals and have these kind of crossovers. It was, I think it informed a lot of my process, and also gave me better insight to what was happening in Turkey and Istanbul through all their experiences too. So invaluable.
Oh, thank you for the comments. It's amazing. I'm so happy, and I'm feeling really privileged to be able to see your process and involved into your works, and to hear about you and your work. It was so great to host you at Gate 27.
Thank you again.
Okay, so if there is any other question, maybe we can stop here. And thanks for joining us today. This video will be on YouTube, so you can reach to this video anytime you want. Thank